88.5 FM, the voice of Maui. Welcome to it. It is the Shaggy Jenkins Show. I am, of course, your host, Shaggy Jenkins. Right ahead of the weekend here in Maui. But wherever you are, wherever you're listening to us from, thank you. And, oh boy, today's show is going to be a doozy. If you've been watching the news over the last 24 hours, we have a lot to discuss today in the show. If you want to follow me online, easy to do that at Shaggy Live. That's my Twitter. Or you can also get on Facebook.com, Facebook.com/Shaggy Live. And if you want to drop an email to the show, it's easy, shaggyjenkins@gmail.com. We are heard on the Pacifica Radio Network, and couldn't be more happier than to be here with you today. Why? Because that means that, ladies and gentlemen, we are all alive. And if you watched the news last night, you noticed that a lot of people are not. Now, I seem to be in this rut lately of having to come on here every single show and talk about another mass shooting, another mass killing, all the motivations behind it and things like that. But can we just have a moment where we all say enough is enough? That this is it. That this is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and as a country, we are going to reevaluate our relationships with law enforcement and guns, and how we police certain neighborhoods, and how people are no longer going to be marginalized in our communities. Isn't it time that this event, the Dallas shootings last night, isn't it time that we finally say, okay, enough is enough? Because in a little bit, I am going to talk more about the Dallas shootings and the events that happened last night at the Black Lives Matter rally. But before I get into any show today, can I make one more plea, because I feel like I'm starting to do these on almost a weekly basis. Can I make one more plea for sanity in an insane world? Can we all make that same plea where we just ask for somebody anywhere to start making sense? Because the events of Dallas last night and the Black Lives Matter, the shootings, the cops killed, the civilians killed, an entire city locked down under a criminal investigation, multiple suspects. And in the wake of a story like that, and after having to do this week after week after week, can we please have one event in this country that spurns some sort of thought into changing the way we are? Now, I spend a lot of time on this show talking about history and stuff like that, and how historical precedent always leads to present-day situation. I spend a lot of time doing that kind of rambling and on, but the fact of the matter is that if you look through history, and it's always been kind of a sad fact that I've had to kind of shelve those feelings every time I look into stories. Laws and change are written in blood. And we've had so much blood spilt over the last couple of weeks. Isn't it time for some change to come from that? Now, no matter where you are across the United States, you probably are familiar with the fact that certain intersections get lights after so many car accidents happen. Chances are you can name the people that died at each intersection where there is stoplights. Because that is us saying, oh, this behavior in this situation is dangerous. We should do something to regulate and control it so it's less dangerous. We do that on the roadways, but we don't do that with mental health or guns or violence. Not 24 hours ago, I was on this show and I was telling people how we are mental about mental health in this country. And yet, Whenever a mass shooting happens, and they will say today, oh, he was a mentally disturbed veteran. He was a mentally disturbed veteran. They will use that terminology today. And going forward from the story, in the wake of the Dallas shootings, the words mentally troubled or mentally unhinged, those kind of terms are going to come out. But not 24 hours ago, I told you how mental we are about that in this country. So let me give you evidence today that says that, hey, we're still mental. Did you know that the Center for Disease Control has actually been actively petitioning for the right to investigate gun violence as an actual health epidemic, as an actual mental health crisis? They want to say, hey, if everybody calls it mental, please let us get involved. The Centers for Disease Control, if this is a mental disease, we're the guys in control of those things. Let us do it. That won't happen. And it goes back to a law that I believe is called the Daly Act. That the CDC can't get involved at looking at the mental health of people around guns. And thanks to lobby groups like the NRA and stuff like that, we also have a large amount of red tape preventing us from keeping guns away from dangerous people. And then you have the events that have been happening over the last couple of weeks, and you're going, maybe this isn't the best course of action for us. And if you're not saying that, what kind of insane person are you? So today, when we start off the show, I just want to start off with, once again, another plea, another begging for sanity. And in hopes that we find it soon, because people are dying and it needs to stop. And we'll come back to this story just a bit later on in the show, but there's a couple of other things that I wanted to talk about today. But still, just a collective, damn, really? Damn. All right, moving on. This week in the news, there is a lot of, if you will notice, between the FBI and the gerrymandering, it's more judicial fun. You will notice that the FBI has been accused of, shall we say, elevating the care that the Clintons have gotten, particularly Hillary Clinton, in the wake of the email scandal. Now, first things first, I know everybody is like, oh, God, here we go, talking about those emails again and secure versus unsecure. Let's establish a couple of well-known facts. Fact one, no email, and I don't care how secure you try to make it, no email is secure, okay? We have to accept that as a reality, because computers are built by people. People build code. Code can possibly be unbuilt by other people. It's just a fact of life. Think about when you were a kid and you had a Lego set and you would build something that you were particularly proud of, and somebody would come along and they would just disassemble the pieces all willy-nilly. Oh, you would get all mad and frustrated. Well, that's the same thing that happens in computer code all the time. So this illusion that you may have that digital communication is in some way secure, you need to go ahead and let go of that illusion. You need to go ahead and just, oh cow, nothing is safe or secure if it's online and digital. Whew. Now, with that said, it is kind of a big deal when you use less secure email channels to send sensitive information. And that is exactly what Hillary was charged of, with having this private email server in her basement. Well, of course, we all knew this was going to happen. After Hillary Clinton became the presumptive Democratic nominee, the charges whoosh and went away. Now, why did they do that? Some people have said, well, of course, there is the whole thing with, the data that she sent out wasn't that sensitive, and the only reason that she got in trouble is because we retroactively made a law that made what she was doing wrong. There's that angle that's out there in the news, and I hear that. But it's more along the lines, if you look at the actual timeline, we changed the law retroactively to make what she did illegal versus illegal. But let's look at the actual head of the FBI, because Comey, however you want to say it, I like it like Comey. Well, he has been, if you look in the news today, there's a couple of stories out there going through his past and his relationship with the Clinton camp. And surprise, 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 ladies and gentlemen, the FBI director has actually been shown to be very lenient to both Bill and Hillary over the years in any dealings that he's had with the Clinton administrations or the Clinton Foundation, in fact. And so when I said not 2-3 days ago on the show that, hey, you know what? This is actually kind of more like a post-Watergate moment where the feds and everybody really just don't want to spend the money that it's going to take to prosecute this case. They don't want to spend the money and the time and oh my God, drag out the patience of the American people all over this thing. And I say it like this thing because, it's been both legal and illegal, so it's not like I could say this illegal act or this perfectly legal act. It's just a thing at this point because people have kept changing what we know about the story. And this thing that everybody wants to go away isn't really going to go away, because on the other side of the aisle, you've got a guy that's trying to run for president, and he just loves stuff like this. And of course, Trump had his tirade and things like that, and he'll probably have another 14, 15 on Twitter before the end of the week. It's okay. Deep breath, we'll get through that together. However, one of the things that has been pointed out is that the FBI director at this moment, the one that was in charge of possibly indicting Hillary for the email scandal, has been shown over time to be categorically favorable towards the Clintons. I don't ever do words of the day or things like that on this show, but I think it's time that we learn a word that I hate to admit is way big in government circles. That word is nepotism. Now, if it's your first time hearing that word, oh God, I am sorry. Because what it means is that if you don't know somebody that knows somebody that knows something about it, you're not getting anywhere in life. See, nepotism is a system of favors passed down from one person, one station to another. And it can be anything from your uncle giving you a prestigious position in a company that maybe you're not exactly qualified for. Maybe a parent or something gives you a higher salary in their business or something like that, and people will say, well, that's unfair. No, that's nepotism, and the government does it all the time. Kind of a quid pro quo sort of system. And in their nepotistic ways, they like to return favors and do favors as it behooves them, but as far as being on the behest of the American people or the interest, not necessarily. See, nepotism works in a kind of a straight linear from on high down below to the peasants kind of a way. It doesn't really go sideways. There's no parallels to it. It's basically just somebody in power saying to somebody else in power, well, screw the little people. And I didn't want to call this whole Hillary thing a nepotism kind of story. But in the wake of everything that you start to see, especially with the relationship of the FBI director, Mr. J. Comey, and the relationship that over time he has had with the Clintons, you start to wonder if this is an actual case of nepotism. Not a case of, let's get this off the American conscience, let's not waste $1 million and $1 billion something dollars down the line for prosecuting all of this stuff, convicting, and then, eventually punishing all these people. If instead of looking at it like a cost-cutting thing, what if this is actually a case of somebody going, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, don't do that again. We had to change a law for you this time to keep it legal, but don't do that again. And I don't want to be a person that lives in a world with conspiracies and things like that, because let's face it, conspiracy is the home of the uninformed. It is the domain of the ignorant. Conspiracy. Conspiracy is something that people resort to when they don't want to put in the effort of investigation, of observation, of speculation even. However, conspiracy is all speculation, except it's not even skeptical speculation. It's just, let's pull the rabbit out of the hat and see where it bounces. So I loathe, I abhor, I hate calling something possibly conspiratorial. But looking over the relationship and stuff between the FBI director and the Clinton White House back in the day, and then Hillary Clinton in particular, there's something there to that. Now, should we waste taxpayers' money investigating it? Probably not. The thing that we should do, though, is say, you know what? You got us this time, but turn in your resignation by the end of the week, because you're not going to get us again. And I've preached, I've begged, I've pleaded, I've even written about it. It's time that we start making hard decisions in this country, and we make those hard decisions consistently. And looking over all of the things that are happening with the Hillary case and stuff right now, you got to ask yourself, if the next person, the next Secretary of State were to come along and do the same act, would things play out the same? Because you put a different FBI director in there, maybe you put in a different person being accused of these acts, and guess what? I'm pretty sure the situation would be a lot more fluid than any of us would imagine. So here, you know, kind of at the end of a sad week, we ask ourselves, is the U.S. government and the FBI guilty of nepotism when it comes to the Hillary email scandal? Sadly, and this is something I know all too well, only history will tell us, and no time soon. We'll come back with more on the Black Lives Matter shooting in Dallas. It's the Shaggy Jenkins Show.
You are listening to 60 Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Due process of law is an ancient principle. Most scholars trace the idea of due process of law in the Anglo-American tradition to Chapter 39 of the Magna Carta of 1215. King John promised, among other things, not to imprison, exile, or destroy any free man or his property except by the lawful judgment of his peers or by the law of the land. The phrase, by the law of the land, meant that government, like the governed, must obey the law. The phrase, due process of law, first appeared in the subsequent 1354 version of the Magna Carta. Both phrases, due process and law of the land, mean that government must follow known and established procedures and may not act arbitrarily or unpredictably in negatively altering or destroying life, liberty, or property. John Locke argued that the purpose of government is to protect life, liberty, and property. Beliefs about what is fair, just, and right when government seeks to affect life, liberty, or property change over time. Therefore, due process is both an ancient and an evolving concept. That's all for today's episode, 60 Second Civics, where civic engagement only takes a minute.
88.5 FM, the voice of Maui. It's the Shaggy Jenkins Show. Welcome back to it. I'm your host, Shaggy Jenkins, on the Pacifica Radio Network. I hope you're having a good day. We were talking a little bit about nepotism ahead of the break. But now it's time to break down some of the sad events of the last 24 hours. Here's the thing. I am, as a radio broadcaster and as a show host, and I'm not going to say this in any sort of polite way, I am getting damn tired of covering stories like this. I would much rather be talking about things that moves the pin of society closer to the goal line than stories like this. Let's get into that story, shall we? Last night at what was otherwise a very peaceful Black Lives Matter rally in Dallas, Texas, shots rang out and 5 officers and 2 civilians were killed. Now, that doesn't count the 7 other officers that are still in the hospital with injuries. And then there's a couple of civilians, too, in injuries. Dallas, as far as the metro area, is locked down because it is still, these many hours later, an active crime scene. All because, and they have just now released this. This is late breaking news if you haven't heard this yet. They have just released the fact that all the other suspects that police have arrested in the shootings have been released. And police are now convinced that the suspect, Micah Johnson, the sniper, was the one and only one behind these attacks. Now, yesterday on the show, we talked about tackling 20 a day. And 20 a day was how many veterans kill themselves. And then after you read the stories of last night, how a combat veteran had come back. Police say that he was carrying a military-style weapon. But then again, don't they all look military-style these days? I mean, what the hell are we hunting out in the woods? Abrams? But Micah Johnson took up arms last night against the Dallas Police Department. And one of the biggest stories that you're not going to hear talked about, which really we should analyze very closely, is a dangerous precedent that was set by the Dallas Police Department and how they handled this active shooter situation. Because you see, what happened is that Micah Johnson rained down shots, killing some, injuring others, causing mass hysteria, panic, looting. as people thought the purge was becoming a reality. And I mean, who wouldn't? You're at a rally, you're in a nice big enclosed concrete jungle. Everything is going great. You're getting to see your neighbors and communities, and then gunshots ring out, and all of a sudden all those tall buildings and stuff start to look like iron bars on a cage. And if you've ever been to a zoo and you've ever seen an animal in a cage and you start to poke that animal in the cage, you realize that their behavior is a little bit more exacerbated than it would be if they were in an open space. So people get trampled, people get pushed, shoved, all in a blind panic as everyone tries to preserve their own life. And when you go to a rally talking about how lives matter, should you really, really be thinking in the back of your head, well, how much does my life matter right now? Because chances are by the end of this night, something crazy is going to break out. That should not be a reality for anyone. And yet last night in Dallas, it was. Now, prior to the shooting breaking out, if you get on Instagram or Facebook or something like that, you'll see people actually posing with the Dallas Police Department. You know, hey, what's up? These are the officers down here at hashtag Black Lives Matter. You know, there was a lot of just standard, hey, cops, hey, peoples, have a good time tonight. Okay, thanks, cops. There was a lot of that. A lot of the good nature stuff that we don't hear enough about in this country when we talk about our police force and our citizenry. But then the shots rang out and people started dying and 5 officers lost their lives. And then this is where things get weird. Because I am a historical person. I love to look at things from a historical perspective. The Dallas events made a lot of history last night. None of it good. This is the highest casualty of police officers since 9/11, according to some reports. This is the most amount of police officers killed at one time, at one event, since we crushed concrete and steel into a busy metropolitan city. And when you put it in words like that, wow. The last time this many officers of the law were killed was when 2 huge skyscrapers crumbled. And this wasn't big apocalyptic act. This wasn't any sort of life-shattering explosions or wartime or anything. This was one person with a gun, and that's how much damage they were able to do in a very short amount of time. Well, cops eventually ended up being able to hole him up after following a blood trail and stuff. They were able to hold up the suspect and then start a long process of negotiation. Yeah, this guy had just killed 7 people, injured countless others, and the police force wanted to negotiate with him. And some people are like, yeah, they should have just killed him. But no. Why? I'm saying it so that you understand that in no way, shape, or form was the Dallas Police Department's mode of operation kill or be killed. It was never that. It was, this is police duty. We have somebody that has committed murder. We have to detain them so that they can face criminal prosecution. That's what a cop's job is. That's what these cops were trying to do. And they did this process for hours and hours and hours. And if you want to talk about mental health in this country among veterans, let's just go ahead and say that some of the ramblings of the shooter were not as coherent as we would like well-balanced people to be. Because immediately starting into the negotiations, the suspect started rattling off all these these conspiracy theories about police officers. Then started yelling for all the officers that were black to leave the area because he was only interested in killing white cops. So if you want to